The bus rumbled down the tree-lined street, carrying Lily closer to a dream she hadn't dared to fully imagine. Her hands, calloused from years of working odd jobs in her small hometown, fidgeted with the strap of her worn handbag. Inside, a single crisp white uniform pressed flat with extra care lay folded. Today was the day, her first day working at Graceland. Lily was only 18, fresh out of high school, and the thought of being part of Elvis Presley's household staff felt like something out of a movie. She'd always loved his music, like most folks in Memphis, but working for him, it was almost too grand to be real. She'd heard stories, of course, the kind that buzzed through the city like a Memphis summer cicada. Stories of his generosity, his temper, his kindness. Most of them were good, but the sheer scale of his fame made her nervous. What if she messed up? What if she wasn't good enough? When the bus finally pulled to a stop a few blocks from the famous gates, Lily took a deep breath. The air was thick with humidity, even in the early morning. But a strange excitement shimmered beneath her anxiety. She walked the rest of the way, her sturdy, practical shoes crunching on the gravel path. The gates of Graceland, grand and imposing, seemed to watch her, silent guardians of a king's castle. Kind-faced security guard, Mr. Johnson, who'd interviewed her briefly a few weeks ago, nodded her through. "Morning, Lily," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Jenkins is expecting you through the front door. Turn right and he'll be in the main office." Lily's heart hammered. The front door, the very entrance Elvis Presley walked through every day. She pushed open the heavy oak door, stepping into a world that felt both familiar from pictures and utterly overwhelming in person. The grand foyer stretched before her, gleaming with polished wood and shining marble. Everything sparkled. Every surface seemed to reflect the soft light pouring in from the windows. She suddenly felt very small, very out of place. A tall, distinguished man in a perfectly tailored suit appeared as if from nowhere. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his expression was serious but not unkind. This had to be Mr. Jenkins, the head butler. He was the one who had given her the job after a rigorous interview process that had felt more like a state exam than a job application. "Miss Hayes," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice crisp and precise. "Welcome to Graceland. I trust your journey was uneventful." "Yes, sir," Lily managed, her voice barely a whisper. She straightened her shoulders, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Good. Follow me, please. We have a lot to cover today." He led her through a maze of corridors, each one more opulent than the last. She saw a glimpse of the famous jungle room, its green shag carpet and dark wood furniture, a stark contrast to the formal elegance elsewhere. She passed rooms filled with gold, records, glittering awards, and countless mementos of Elvis's incredible career. Each item seemed to hum with history, with the energy of millions of fans. Lily felt a growing sense of responsibility pressing down on her. These weren't just objects, they were pieces of a legend. She was here to ensure they were cared for, that Graceland remained pristine for its famous owner. It was a daunting task for someone who had mostly cleaned her own small, messy bedroom. Mr. Jenkins led her into a small, tidy office. On the desk sat a stack of papers and a list. "This is your schedule, Miss Hayes," he explained, handing her a neatly typed sheet. "Your primary duties will be in the main living areas, the dining room and the master suite on occasion. Attention to detail is paramount and is comfort above all else. Every surface, every item must be treated with the utmost respect." Lily nodded, her eyes scanning the list. Dusting, polishing, vacuuming, arranging. It all sounded simple enough, but she knew the reality would be far more demanding. There were so many priceless things, so many chances to make a mistake. She imagined herself, broom in hand, accidentally knocking over some precious bact. A cold knot formed in her stomach. "You will be working primarily with Brenda and Sarah, two of our most experienced housekeepers," Mr. Jenkins continued. She had a tendency to daydream. None of those traits would serve her well here. She thought of her family, how proud they were of her getting this job, how much they were relying on her to send money home, Failure was not an option. As Mr. Jenkins dismissed her to change into her uniform, Lily walked slowly to the staff changing room. She pulled on the crisp white dress, the apron, and the neat cap. She looked in the mirror. A young woman, a little scared but also determined, stared back. She smoothed down her hair, took another deep breath, and told herself, "You can do this, Lily. Just don't break anything." The words felt like a prayer, a silent plea to the universe on her very first day. The grand, silent house seemed to hum around her, full of its secrets and its treasures. Lily spent her first week in a whirlwind of learning, observing and trying not to trip over her own feet. Brenda and Sarah, her new colleagues, were patient but firm. Brenda was a no-nonsense woman with a kind smile, her hands constantly moving as she dusted or polished. Sarah was younger, only a few years older than Lily, with a quick wit and a knack for spotting dust where Lily saw only clean surfaces. "You'll get the hang of it," Brenda had said on Lily's second day, watching her carefully polish a silver frame in the living room. "Just remember, everything has its place, and everything is valuable. Not just money valuable, but history." Lily quickly understood what Brenda meant. Every item in Graceland seemed to have a story. The grand piano in the music room, the exotic furniture in the jungle room, the countless framed photographs that lined the hallways, showing Elvis with celebrities, family, and fans. Lily felt like she was constantly surrounded by echoes of the past, by the energy of a man who is both a global icon and, here in his home, just Mr. Presley. She learned the specific cleaning routines for each room. The library, with its rows of leather-bound books that needed careful dusting. The dining room, where the long polished table had to be pristine enough to reflect the crystal chandelier above. The living room always kept ready for guests, even when none were expected. One item in particular caught Lily's attention every time she entered the living room. It was a magnificent, slender blue vase. It sat on a small, antique side table next to a plush velvet armchair, bathed in the soft glow of a nearby lamp. The vase was made of delicate porcelain, painted with intricate gold patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer as the light hit them. It was easily 1.5 feet tall, elegant and fragile, a testament to exquisite craftsmanship. "That's the Ming vase," Sarah had whispered to her one afternoon, catching Lily admiring it. "Mr. Presley's mother, Gladys, loved it. She bought it on one of their trips. It's one of his favorite pieces in the house. Very old, very expensive, and very, very easy to break." Sarah's voice had dropped to a dramatic whisper on the last part, making Lily's stomach clench. "Gladys?" Lily asked, surprised. She knew Elvis had been incredibly close to his mother. The idea that this beautiful, fragile object had belonged to her, that it was a link to his past, made it even more special, and therefore even more terrifying to be near. "Yup," Sarah confirmed, carefully dusting a nearby table with a soft cloth. "He keeps it right there. Says it reminds him of her. So treat it like it's made of spun sugar and dragon's tears." Lily mentally filed that information away. The Ming vase, Gladys's vase. It became a focal point of her anxiety. Every time she cleaned the living room, she moved around it with exaggerated care, her movements slow and deliberate. She would polish the table it sat on, then carefully dust the vase itself, holding her breath, her fingers barely grazing its smooth surface. It felt like holding a cloud so light, so delicate. She saw Mr. Presley a few times during that first week, not up close, not to speak to him, but glimpses. A flash of a dark suit as he walked quickly down a hallway, his distinct laugh echoing from the kitchen, the distant strum of a guitar coming from what she assumed was his private den. He was taller than she expected and carried himself with an easy confidence, even in his own home. He looked exactly like the photos, but also different, more human. Less like a painted image. He was a living, breathing person who sometimes liked to eat fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches. The staff had a quiet respect for him. They spoke of him with fondness, but also with a certain awe. He was their employer, yes, but he was also Elvis. It was a unique dynamic. Lily saw the pride in their eyes when they spoke of him. She wanted to earn that same pride, that same respect. She wanted to prove she was worthy of working in this legendary home. As her first week drew to a close, Lily started to feel more comfortable. The initial panic had lessened, replaced by a steady rhythm of work. She knew where everything went, how each cloth was used, which cleaning solution, for which surface. Her hands, once so clumsy, were becoming more adept, more gentle. She was learning to navigate the grandeur of Graceland without feeling quite so overwhelmed. On Friday afternoon, as she finished up in the living room, she paused again by the Ming vase. The afternoon light caught its gold patterns, making them glow. It really was beautiful. She felt a strange connection to it, not just as a precious object, but as a silent guardian of history, a link to the past, to Gladys, to Elvis himself. She carefully polished the table one last time, her fingers brushing near the base of the vase. "You're safe with me," she whispered to it. A silly habit she sometimes had with inanimate objects. Little did she know how quickly those words would be put to the test. The second week at Graceland started much like the first, a steady hum of activity. Lily felt more confident now, her movements around the house, fluid and purposeful. She knew the rhythms of the staff, the quiet signals between Brenda and Sarah, the best times to clean certain rooms without disturbing Mr. Presley or his guests. She even started to enjoy the work, finding a quiet satisfaction in making the grand rooms sparkle. It was a Tuesday, a day that started out perfectly ordinary. The sun streamed through the living room windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A constant reminder of the never-ending battle against dirt. Lily had already polished the grand piano, vacuumed the thick carpets, and wiped down the ornate picture frames. The last task in the living room was the small, antique side table next to the velvet armchair, the one where the Ming vase stood like a sentinel. Lily approached it with her usual caution. She picked up her soft, lint-free cloth, damp with a special wood polish. She carefully moved the lamp to the side, then reached for a small stack of magazines that were neatly piled on the corner of the table. Mr. Jenkins had drilled into them the importance of keeping everything exactly as it was, unless instructed otherwise. She lifted the magazines, her eyes momentarily drawn to the headlines. On one of them, another story about Elvis's latest movie. As she shifted them, her sleeve, perhaps a little too loose that day, brushed against the vase. Not a hard hit, not a bump, but a gentle, almost imperceptible nudge. But it was enough. The Ming vase, so delicate, so balanced, wobbled. For a split-second time, seemed to slow down in horror. She reached out a desperate, clumsy lunge, her fingers grasping at air, trying to catch it, to somehow defy gravity and physics. It was too late. The vase tipped slowly at first, then picked up speed, arcing through the air like a fragile blue bird taking an unfortunate flight. Lily watched, paralyzed, as it plummeted towards the polished hardwood floor. A sharp, sickening crack echoed through the grand, silent living room. It wasn't just a single sound. It was a symphony of shattering, a cascade of delicate porcelain exploding into countless pieces. The gold patterns, once so beautiful, now lay in a glittering, jagged mosaic on the floor. Lily stared, her breath caught in her chest, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. The Ming vase, Gladys's vase, Elvis's favorite. It was gone. Shattered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the frantic hammering of her own heart. She felt a cold dread spread through her veins, chilling her to the bone. Her hands trembled so violently she had to clench them into fists. Her face felt hot, then cold. Tears pricked at her eyes, blurring the already devastating scene before her. She had done it. On her second week she had broken something priceless, something irreplaceable. The perfection Mr. Jenkins had demanded seemed like a cruel joke. Now she had failed spectacularly. Panic began to set in. What would happen? Would she be fired instantly? Would she have to pay for it? She had heard stories of staff being held responsible for damages. though never something this extreme. The vase was old. It was probably worth more than she would make in a year. Maybe 5 years. She imagined telling her family the disappointment in their eyes, the shame. She looked around the empty room as if hoping for a magical reversal for the pieces to fly back together. But they lay there mocking her, sharp fragments reflecting the sunlight. A few larger pieces stood out, bits of the elegant neck, a curve of the base. Most of it was just shrapnel. She needed to clean it up immediately before anyone saw. But her hands were shaking too much to even pick up a broom. And what about the side table? It was scratched, maybe even dented. From the impact, the evidence of her catastrophic mistake, Lily's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. A place to hide, but there was nowhere. Her legs felt like lead. She was trapped, standing over the wreckage of her biggest mistake yet. The footsteps grew closer, punctuated by the faint clatter of hands from the kitchen. It was Mrs. Henderson, the cook, a kind but watchful woman. Lily imagined the expression on Mrs. Henderson's face when she saw the shattered porcelain. Then Mr. Jenkins, his disappointment sharp and precise. And then Mr. Presley. The thought of facing Elvis the King after such a blunder made her stomach clench even tighter. She pictured his famous scowl, his anger. She had always heard he could be temperamental, especially when things didn't go his way. And this was far from going his way. This was a disaster. Lily closed her eyes, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. The sound of the vase breaking echoed again in her mind, a haunting reminder of the instant her dream job turned into a nightmare. Mrs. Henderson, humming a gospel tune as she carried a freshly baked pecan pie, stopped dead in the hallway. The tune died on her lips. She wasn't humming anymore. She was listening. A sharp, distinct crack followed by the unmistakable sound of something delicate, shattering into a million pieces, had just echoed through the quiet house. It sounded like it had come from the main living room. Her brow furrowed. "Oh dear," she murmured, her heart giving a little lurch. She gently placed the pie on a small table near the kitchen door and hurried towards the living room, her comfortable shoes making soft thuds on the polished floor. Meanwhile, Lily stood frozen, staring at the devastation. Her mind raced, replaying the slow motion, fall, the awful sound. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her short career at Graceland was over. Not only that, but her reputation would be shattered too much like the vase. Lily, what on earth? Mrs. Henderson's voice was soft, but filled with alarm. Lily slowly turned, her face pale, eyes wide and brimming with tears. Mrs. Henderson took in the scene. Lily, trembling, standing over a glittering heap of blue and gold porcelain shards, the empty spot on the antique table, the small scratch on the wood. "Oh, sweet mercy," Mrs. Henderson whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. She recognized the vase instantly. Everyone on staff knew the Ming vase, and everyone knew its importance. She just shook her head, tears finally escaping and running down her cheeks. Her throat was tight, choked with shame and fear. "It was an accident," she finally managed, her voice cracking. I just brushed it. It just fell." She gestured helplessly at the wreckage as if to say, "See, it just happened." Mrs. Henderson knelt down, carefully avoiding the sharp pieces. She picked up a larger fragment, her eyes set. "Oh, Lily, this is not good." Her tone wasn't angry, but deeply concerned. It was the concern that hurt Lily more than any scolding might have. Conveyed the gravity of the situation without needing harsh words. Just then, Mr. Jenkins appeared in the doorway, drawn by Mrs. Henderson's distressed tone. His sharp eyes immediately took in the scene. His expression, usually so composed, tightened. "What in heaven's name?" he began, his voice low and serious. Lily flinched, bracing herself for the inevitable reprimand. The firing. She imagined him calling her incompetent, careless, all the things she was afraid she was. Mr. Jenkins stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping from the shattered vase to Lily's tear-streaked face. He didn't raise his voice, but the very air around him seemed to grow colder. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice measured. "Can you explain this?" Lily tried to speak, but her words caught. She was shaking so badly she felt like she might collapse. I tried to catch it, sir. It just slipped. Mr. Jenkins repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. His tone wasn't accusing, but it left no doubt about the severity of the situation. This vase has been in this family for decades. It was one of Mr. Presley's most cherished possessions. A gift from his mother. The words hit Lily like physical blows. Cherished him faster now. Hot and unstoppable. Mrs. Henderson, seeing Lily's distress, placed a comforting hand on her arm. "It was an accident, Mr. Jenkins." "Lily's new. She's been very careful." Mr. Jenkins sighed a long, weary sound. "Careful isn't enough, Mrs. Henderson. When dealing with irreplaceable objects, this is a serious matter. Mr. Presley will need to be informed immediately." Lily's breath hitched. "Inform Mr. Presley, the king, the man whose temper was legendary even if his kindness was too—" Her mind reeled. She imagined him striding into the room, his face dark, his voice booming. She was a nobody, a new maid, and she had destroyed something precious to him. "No, please," Lily choked out, her voice barely audible. I can try to fix it. Maybe glue." The desperation in her voice was maybe glue. Mr. Jenkins looked at her with a hint of pity, but his expression remained grim. "Miss Hayes, this is beyond glue. This is a matter of profound importance. I must speak with Mr. Presley." He turned to leave the room, presumably to go find Elvis. Lily watched him go, feeling a wave of despair wash over her. This was it. Her dream job was over. Her career, barely begun, was ending in disaster. She was standing in the very heart of Graceland, surrounded by its beauty and its history. And all she could see was the shattered porcelain on the floor, a stark monument to her failure. She braced herself. The king was coming. The moments after Mr. Jenkins left felt like an eternity to Lily. The silence in the living room, broken only by her ragged breathing and the faint comforting presence of Mrs. Henderson, stretched taut. Every nerve in Lily's body was on edge, waiting for the inevitable. She could practically feel the thunder building in the air. Mrs. Henderson, seeing Lily's deep distress, gently guided her to the velvet armchair. "Away from the glass shards. Sit down, dear," she said, her voice soft but firm. "No need to stand over it. There's nothing you can do now except wait." Lily sank into the plush chair, feeling its softness offer a brief fleeting comfort against the hard reality of her situation. She pressed her hands to her temples, trying to stop the throbbing headache that had started behind her eyes. She imagined Elvis, wherever he was in the house, perhaps in his den or by the pool, suddenly being told about the vase, his initial shock, then his mounting anger. She could almost hear the low growl of his voice, the frustration. Then she heard it, footsteps distinct, heavier than Mr. Jenkins's, more deliberate. There was no mistaking the sound. Elvis Presley was coming. Lily's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might burst through her chest. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second and forced them open. She had to face this. She had to take responsibility. A tall figure appeared in the doorway. It was him, Elvis Presley. He wasn't in his stage clothes, of course. He wore simple dark trousers and a casual button-down shirt, the top few buttons undone. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his sideburns famously long. But it wasn't the image from a poster. His face, usually so expressive, was calm, almost unreadable. His famous blue eyes scanned the room, first sweeping over the shattered vase on the floor, then moving to Mr. Jenkins, who stood respectfully a step behind him, and finally settling on Lily. Lily felt his gaze like a physical touch. It wasn't accusatory. Not yet. It was something else. She wanted to shrink into the armchair, to disappear entirely, but she couldn't. She met his eyes for a brief moment, then her gaze flickered back to the broken porcelain, unable to hold his stare. "Mr. Presley?" Mr. Jenkins began, his voice a little strained. "I regret to inform you that there has been an unfortunate accident in the living room. The Ming vase." He gestured to the pieces on the floor. Elvis didn't interrupt. He simply walked further into the room, his movements slow and measured. He knelt down surprisingly, not to scold, but to inspect the damage. He reached out a hand almost as if to touch a large fragment, then pulled back, mindful of the sharpness. His expression remained unreadable, a blank slate that only intensified Lily's fear. What was he thinking? Was he raging inside? Was he cowbeating the cost? "Mr. Presley, sir," she stammered, finding her voice surprisingly weak. I am so sorry. It was entirely my fault. I was just moving the magazines and I accidentally brushed it, and it just fell." Her voice broke on the last word. She couldn't keep the tremble out of it. "I know it was your mother's. I know how important it was to you. I'm so sorry." She expected an outburst, a sharp word, a dismissal, but Elvis remained silent. Still kneeling by the shards, picked up one of the larger pieces, gently turning it over in his fingers, his thumb tracing the delicate gold pattern. For a long moment he just looked at it. The silence was excruciating. Lily could feel the weight of Mr. Jenkins' watchful gaze, Mrs. Henderson's sympathetic stare, but most of all the silent judgment she imagined coming from Elvis. Finally he spoke. His voice was low, softer than she expected, almost a murmur. "Are you all right, darling?" Lily blinked. She wasn't sure she had heard him correctly. Had he just asked if she was all right? "Sir," she managed, her confusion overriding her fear for a brief moment. He stood up slowly, his eyes still on the broken pieces for a moment longer. Then he turned fully to face her. His gaze was no longer intense or unreadable. It was filled with genuine concern. "Your hands," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Did you cut yourself on any of the pieces? You look a little pale." Lily looked down at her hands. They were trembling, but unharmed. "I didn't cut myself." Elvis nodded slowly. He looked around the room, then back at Lily. There was only a profound calm, and something else she couldn't quite name. It certainly wasn't the reaction she had braced herself for. The famous king of rock and roll, standing in his own living room, looking not at the ruin of his precious antique, but at the trembling, tearful face of his new maid, asking if she was okay. It was completely unexpected. And in that moment, Lily felt a tiny flicker of hope, so faint she almost didn't dare to acknowledge it. Lily was stunned. She had prepared for anger, for a sharp reprimand, for the immediate end of her employment. Instead, Elvis Presley had asked if she was hurt. Question hung in the air. A small, unexpected kindness in the face of such a big disaster. "No, sir," Lily repeated, her voice still shaky but a little stronger now. "I'm not hurt. Just so very sorry." She gestured again to the shattered vase, feeling the tears well up again. Not from fear now, but from the overwhelming relief, mixed with shame. Elvis walked over to her, his gaze still holding that surprising gentleness. He wasn't intimidating, not in that moment. He was just a man, calm and observant. He even offered a small, reassuring smile, though it was tinged with a little sadness as he glanced at the broken pieces. "It's just a thing, darling," he said, his voice soft, almost a drawl. He paused, looking at the mess. "A beautiful thing, yes, and a piece of history for sure." He picked up another fragment, turning it over in his hand. "My mama did love this vase. It reminded her of the sky," she said, bright and clear. Lily listened, mesmerized. He wasn't minimizing the vase's value or importance. He acknowledged it, but his tone was reflective, not accusatory. "But it's just glass or porcelain or whatever it is," he continued, looking from the shard in his hand to Lily's face. "And people are worth more than any vase. Always." Lily's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was something else entirely. She glanced at Mr. Jenkins, who looked equally surprised, though he quickly composed himself. Mrs. Henderson, however, had a soft, knowing smile on her face, as if this was exactly what she had expected from him. "You look like you've seen a ghost, child," Elvis said, a hint of playful warmth entering his voice. "I ain't gonna yell at you for breaking some old vase. Accidents happen. You're new here, still getting your bearings." He tossed the small shard he was holding gently into the pile. "What's done is done." He walked over to the side table, examining the small scratch Lily had noticed earlier. He ran a finger over it, then shrugged slightly. "A little polish will take care of that. Nothing that can't be fixed." He looked back at Lily. "Are you sure you're not hurt? Not even a little cut?" Lily shook her head, tears still silently streaming down her face. Now tears of overwhelming relief. "No, sir. I'm so sorry." The apology came out naturally. Heartfelt, Elvis sighed a gentle sound. "Don't you worry about it, honey. Really, it's not the end of the world." He paused, then looked at Mr. Jenkins. "Jenkins, get the broom and dustpan. Let's get this cleaned up before someone steps on it." Mr. Jenkins, perhaps still a little stunned by the lack of outburst, nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Presley." Immediately. He hurried off to fetch the cleaning supplies. Elvis then turned back to Lily. "Now you look like you need a cup of coffee or maybe some sweet tea. Mrs. Henderson, could you rustle up something for Miss Hayes?" "Of course, Mr. Presley," Mrs. Henderson said, her smile widening. "Right away. And I'll bring some for you too, if you like." "That'd be mighty fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you kindly." Elvis turned his attention back to the broken vase. He didn't seem particularly upset. More resigned, even philosophical everything. He wasn't angry. He wasn't firing her. He was worried about her. And he was asking for coffee. It was so far from her terrified expectations that her mind was reeling. As Mr. Jenkins returned with the broom and dustpan, Elvis surprised them all again. "Here, Jenkins, I'll help you with that." He took the dustpan, and to Lily's utter astonishment, he knelt down again, carefully sweeping the sharp shards into the dustpan himself. The king of rock and roll picking up broken pieces of porcelain off his own living room floor, Mr. Jenkins looked momentarily flustered. "Mr. Presley, sir, there's no need. I can handle this. Many hands make light work, ain't that right? And besides, I want to make sure none of these little devils are left behind. Don't want anyone getting hurt." He worked methodically, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he swept the glittering fragments. Lily watched, speechless. This wasn't just kindness. This was humility. This was grace. This was a man who, despite his immense fame, cared more about the well-being of his staff than about a material possession, no matter how cherished or expensive. The scene was so profoundly unexpected, so utterly human, that it began to etch itself into Lily's memory, slowly replacing the image of the shattered vase with the image of Elvis kneeling on the floor, sweeping up the mess with a quiet calm. This was a legend in the making. Quiet whir of the broom sweeping shattered porcelain into the dustpan was the only sound in the living room, besides the soft clinking of the fragments themselves. Elvis Presley, the man millions adored, continued to carefully sweep the floor, his brow furrowed in concentration. Mr. Jenkins, after his initial surprise, had quickly joined him, picking up larger pieces by hand, albeit with far more caution. Mrs. Henderson returned with a tray, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a glass of sweet tea for Lily. "Here you go, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, placing the tea in front of Lily, who was still seated in the armchair, watching the surreal scene unfold. "Take a few sips. It'll calm your nerves." Lily gratefully took the glass, her hands still trembling slightly, but now from a mixture of shock and profound relief. She took a slow sip of the sweet tea. It was exactly what she needed. Elvis finished sweeping up the last of the tiny shards, emptying the dustpan into a small, sturdy box Mr. Jenkins held. He stood up, brushing off his hands. "There," he said, surveying the now clean spot on the floor. "See? All gone. Just a memory now." He then looked directly at Lily. "Don't you dwell on it. Understand? It was an accident, and it could happen to anyone. He walked over to her. His posture relaxed. He wasn't imposing, just genuine. "Tell you what, Lily," he said, his famous smile finally gracing his lips, a warm, reassuring curve that reached his eyes. "Sometimes things just need to break to remind us what's truly important, and that's people. You, my staff, your safety. Everything else, it's just stuff." Lily could only nod, tears still in her eyes, but now they were tears of gratitude. She had never expected such kindness, such understanding, especially from someone of his stature. She had been ready for fury, for disappointment, for blame. Instead, she received empathy. Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Presley, sir, if I may, are you certain you don't wish to explore replacement options? Or perhaps have the pieces sent for an expert restoration?" He sounded hesitant, clearly still trying to process his employer's reaction. Elvis shook his head. "Nah, Jenkins, it wouldn't be the same, would it? It was Mama's, sure, but it was also just a vase. It served its purpose, sat there looking pretty now. It's part of its story now, a new chapter, you could say." He paused, then looked at Lily. "And you, Miss Hayes, you're part of that story now too, not as the one who broke it, but as the one who reminded me that things can always be replaced. But good people, good hearts, those are rare." He then looked at Mr. Jenkins and Mrs. Henderson, his gaze warm. "We got a good team here, don't we? Best in the world, and I ain't gonna let a little broken porcelain mess with that." Mrs. Henderson beamed, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Indeed we do, Mr. Presley, indeed we do." Mr. Jenkins, still a bit stiff but with a softening in his eyes, nodded in agreement. "Yes, Mr. Presley, absolutely." He then glanced at Lily, a subtle nod of approval in his expression. Elvis clapped his hands together lightly. "All right then, crisis averted. Now, Mrs. Henderson, what kind of treats did you bring us besides coffee?" He winked at Lily. "This young lady here looks like she needs a good laugh and something sweet to eat." "After all that," Mrs. Henderson chuckled, "pecan pie, Mr. Presley, fresh from the oven. Pecan pie." Elvis exclaimed, his spirits seemingly lifted instantly. "Now, that's a remedy for just about anything, ain't it, Lily?" He grinned at her, a genuinely friendly smile that invited her to share in his easygoing nature. Lily, still overwhelmed, managed a small, watery smile in return. "Yes, sir. It sounds wonderful." As Elvis and Mrs. Henderson moved towards the kitchen, chatting about the pie, Mr. Jenkins lingered for a moment. He looked at Lily, a rare, almost imperceptible softening in his usually stern gaze. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly, "that was quite the situation. You handled yourself well, all things considered. And Mr. Presley, well, he's a remarkable man, isn't he?" Lily nodded, too choked up to speak. Mr. Jenkins gave her another brief, approving nod, then followed Elvis and Mrs. Henderson. Left alone, in the living room, Lily looked at the now empty spot where the Ming vase had once stood. The physical object was gone, reduced to fragments in a box, but in its place, a different kind of beauty had emerged. The profound kindness of a famous man, the unexpected compassion that transcended the value of any material thing. She knew with absolute certainty that what had just happened would be talked about. Not just by her, but by Mrs. Henderson, by Mr. Jenkins, by Brenda and Sarah. It would become a story passed around the staff, a testament to the true character of Elvis Presley. The shattered vase wouldn't be a symbol of her failure, but a symbol of his incredible humanity. This was the moment the staff legend began. The next morning, the air at Graceland felt lighter to Lily. The heavy weight of dread that had pressed down on her for the past 24 hours had lifted, replaced by a profound sense of relief and a quiet awe. She still felt a pang of regret when she looked at the empty spot on the side table, but it was no longer accompanied by terror. Instead, she thought of Elvis's kind eyes, his words. "It's just a thing, darlin'. People are worth more than any vase." The story, as Lily knew it, would spread like wildfire through the staff. Brenda and Sarah heard it from Mrs. Henderson over breakfast. Lily herself, still a bit shy, recounted it to them later that morning, her voice still filled with disbelief at Elvis's reaction. "Can you believe it?" Lily whispered to Brenda as they dusted the trophy room later that day. He wasn't angry at all. He helped clean it up, and he asked if I was okay." Brenda smiled, a knowing look on her face. "That's Mr. Presley for you, Lily. People on the outside, they see the glitz and the glamour, the temper on stage sometimes. But in here," she tapped her chest, "he's got the biggest heart." "He's always been like that," Sarah added, polishing a gold record until it gleamed. "Remember when Mrs. Henderson's car broke down last winter? He sent his own driver to pick her up and then paid for all the repairs himself, didn't he?" "That's right," Brenda chimed in. "And when my little girl was sick with the flu, he sent a big basket of toys and books over to cheer her up, even though he'd never even met her." Lily listened, a warmth spreading through her. She had heard stories, yes, but to experience his kindness firsthand and to hear her colleagues confirm it with their own anecdotes deepened her understanding of the man. It made her feel truly part of the Graceland family, not just a hired hand. Throughout the day, Lily noticed subtle changes in how the other staff members interacted with her. Mr. Jenkins, usually so formal, gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement when he passed her in the hallway. Mrs. Henderson winked at her from the kitchen door, offering her an extra piece of pie at lunch. Even the security guards seemed to look at her with a newfound respect, as if she had passed some kind of unspoken test. It wasn't just that she hadn't been fired. It was that Elvis's reaction had validated her, had shown everyone that she was valued. She wasn't just a clumsy new maid who broke things. She was a person worthy of concern and forgiveness. The following days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lily found her confidence growing steadily. The fear of making a mistake hadn't vanished entirely. It would probably always be there, a quiet background hum when she was around. Priceless objects, but it was no longer crippling. She worked with a newfound dedication, driven not just by the need to keep her job, but by a genuine desire to contribute to the home of a man who had shown her such extraordinary grace. A few days later, Lily had a direct interaction with Elvis again, though a very brief one. She was in the dining room carefully polishing the chairs when he walked in, heading towards the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her. "Morning, Lily," he said, his voice easy and friendly. Lily straightened up quickly, a little surprised to be directly. "Good morning, Mr. Presley," he smiled. "Yes, sir," she replied, a blush rising on her cheeks. "Much better, thank you, sir, for everything." He simply nodded, his smile widening slightly. And with that he was gone, leaving Lily with a warm feeling in her chest. It was a small interaction, but it confirmed that his kindness wasn't a one-time act of benevolence. It was simply who he was. The broken vase incident, as it was now referred to among the staff, quickly became a staple story. When a new person joined the team, Brenda or Sarah would inevitably pull them aside, usually over a cup of coffee in the staff lounge, and recount the tale. It was always told with a sense of wonder and pride, highlighting not the fragility of the vase, but the strength of Elvis's character. "And he wasn't mad?" the new staff member would always ask wide-eyed. "Not one bit," Sarah would declare. "Said people were worth more than any fancy old pot." Lily, sometimes listening from afar, would feel a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about her breaking the vase anymore. It was about the king's reaction, about his unexpected and profound humanity. It wasn't a story of shame, but a story of kindness. And that, she realized, was a much better legend to be a part of months turned into a year. Then too, Lily was no longer the new maid. She was a trusted, valuable member of the Graceland staff. Her hands, once clumsy and hesitant, now moved with the practiced ease of an expert. She knew every nook and cranny of the mansion, every valuable item, every routine. The initial fear that had plagued her on her first day was a distant memory, replaced by a quiet confidence and a deep respect for her workplace and its famous owner. The story of the broken Ming vase had indeed become a staff legend. It was recounted so often, especially to new hires, that it had taken on a life of its own. Variations would emerge. Sometimes the vase was described as being even more ancient. Sometimes Elvis's words were quoted with even more dramatic flourish. But the core message remained the same. Elvis Presley valued people over possession. Lily herself would sometimes share the story, though always with a humble tone, deflecting any attention from her role in the accident and focusing entirely on Elvis's surprising kindness. It was her personal proof, her tangible experience of the king's genuine heart. Her interactions with Elvis became more frequent, though always respectful and brief. He would nod to her in the hallways, sometimes offer a quick, "How are you doing today, Lily?" or a comment about the weather. He never mentioned the vase, never alluded to it, as if it had truly been swept away with the broken pieces. This unspoken understanding was another layer of his consideration. He didn't want to remind her of her mistake, only to reinforce his trust in her. One afternoon, Lily was dusting the living room, a task she now performed with a serene focus. She glanced at the empty spot where the Ming vase had once sat. The small scratch on the antique table had been buffed out so well it was barely visible. The space now held a simple, elegant crystal bowl filled with fresh flowers from the Graceland gardens. It was beautiful in its own way, but it wasn't the Ming vase. She paused, her dusting, her gaze lingering on the bowl. She thought of Gladys, Elvis's mother, and how much she had loved the blue vase. And then she thought of Elvis kneeling on the floor, sweeping up the pieces, and his words, "People are worth more than any vase, always." It was a profound lesson, one that had reshaped Lily's understanding of wealth and value. She had come from a background where every possession was cherished, every item held onto for as long as possible. To see someone with so much so easily let go of something so valuable simply because he cared more about a person's feelings was eye-opening. The staff at Graceland, bound by their shared experiences and their unique employer, felt like a true family. They ate together, sometimes laughed about the quirks of their famous boss, and always shared a deep respect for him. The vase incident, far from being a blot on Lily's record, had cemented her place within this family. It had proven that she was reliable, that she could handle difficult situations, and that she had been deemed worthy of forgiveness by the king himself. Lily learned a lot about Elvis. Through her daily life at Graceland, she saw his quiet moments of reflection, his generosity towards friends and family, his occasional bursts of spontaneous song, his genuine love for gospel music. She saw the intense pressure he lived under, the constant demands of fame, and how he sought solace in the quiet grandeur of his home. The legend of the broken vase wasn't just a story about a single act of kindness. It was a microcosm of Elvis's true character. It showed that beneath the rhinestones, the millions of records, and the screaming fans was a man with a fundamentally good heart, a man who understood human frailty, who believed in second chances, and who truly valued the well-being of the people around him. Lily often thought about how different her life would have been if Elvis had reacted with anger that day. She probably would have been fired, would have carried the shame of the incident for years. Instead, thanks to his compassion, she had found not just a job, but a place where she felt valued, where she was learning and growing, and where she was part of something truly legendary. The broken vase was a memory, yes, but the kindness shown to her that day was a living, breathing part of her life at Graceland, shaping her future in ways she never could have imagined. Years turned into a decade. Lily Hayes, no longer the timid new maid, had risen through the ranks at Graceland. She was now the head housekeeper, overseeing a team of staff, many of whom she had personally trained. She moved through the mansion with authority and grace, her quiet demeanor belying the strength she had cultivated over the years. Graceland felt like home, its walls whispering stories of joy, music, and quiet moments. The Ming vase incident remained a cornerstone of staff lore. Even after Elvis's passing, the story continued to be told, becoming an even more poignant testament to his character. New staff members arriving long after his death would hear the tale from veterans like Lily, Mr. Jenkins, who eventually retired but visited often, and Mrs. Henderson, who continued to bake her famous pecan pies, and he just said, "People are worth more than any vase?" A young new maid named Chloe asked Lily one afternoon, her eyes wide with wonder, after hearing the story for the first time. Lily smiled, a soft, reminiscent light in her eyes. "Exactly, Chloe," he swept it up himself, asked if I was hurt before he even looked at the pieces. "Wow," Chloe breathed, clearly awestruck. "You always hear so much about him, the king and all that, but this makes him seem so real." "He was," Lily affirmed. "More real than most. He was the king, yes, but he was also just Mr. Presley, a kind man who knew what truly mattered." Lily often reflected on that day. Years ago, when her world seemed to shatter along with the vase, it was more than just a job for her now. It was a mission to uphold the standards of care and kindness that Elvis himself had demonstrated. She instilled in her team the same values. Attention to detail, yes, but always, always, compassion and respect for each other. There were moments sometimes when Lily would catch herself mid-task, looking at the crystal bowl that now sat on the antique table in the living room. It was a beautiful piece, but it would never replace the Ming vase, and perhaps that was the point. The empty space, or the presence of something new, was a quiet reminder. A reminder of fragility. Yes, but more importantly, a reminder of Elvis's profound empathy. She remembered the day he died. The world mourned the king. Graceland was filled with a different kind of silence. Then, a deep, pervasive grief. Lily, like all the staff, felt the immense loss personally, but even in her sorrow she carried the warmth of his memory, the echo of his words, the feeling of his gentle concern. Graceland became a museum, open to the public, allowing millions of fans to walk through the very rooms Lily had once painstakingly cleaned. She continued her work, adapting to the new reality, ensuring that every fan felt the warmth and spirit of the home. She was a silent guardian of his legacy, not just the physical objects, but the unseen values he embodied. The story of the broken vase wasn't just a legend within the staff anymore. It became a quiet, unofficial part of Graceland's history, shared in hushed tones by guides who had heard it from veterans. Like Lily, it became a story that spoke to the man behind the music, a glimpse into his true humanity. Lily knew that fame could be a strange thing, often distorting reality, creating an image far removed from the truth. But her experience that terrifying, beautiful day had shown her the truth of Elvis Presley. He was a superstar, an icon, a phenomenon. But he was also a compassionate employer, a forgiving soul, a man who saw the value in a person over the value of a possession. As she walked through the quiet halls of Graceland in the evenings, after the last visitors had left, the polished floors gleaming, the lamps casting soft pools of light, Lily sometimes felt his presence. Not a ghost, but an echo of his kindness, a quiet hum of the legend he had created, not just with his music, but with his heart. The broken vase was long gone, but the lesson it taught, the legend it spawned, lived on a heart-warming reminder of the king's most enduring legacy, his deep and unwavering human kindness.